At the recent Art Textiles Biennale in a small regional town in Victoria, I was lucky to discover the work of Liz Hamilton Quay, a Pennsylvanian-based sculptural fibre and materials artist who just happens to be the Assistant Professor of Textile and Materials Studies at Kutztown University. Liz's textile piece caught my eye and drew me into the soft and intricate details. Once close enough, the title of the piece, Ovum, further intrigued, and I just had to find out more. Liz has three great passions in life: family, fibre arts and teaching, and considers herself a textile problem solver. After all, that's what art is, creative problem solving. It is clear to see Liz's creative approach is based on her natural curiosity for materials, a joy for making, and as a sculptural fibre and materials artist, she is drawn to the manipulation of flexible materials. Her work tends to be varied in appearance, but it thematically focuses on the clashing of soft and hard, the transformation of plain or seemingly ugly materials to reveal their beautiful and delicate qualities. Liz is driven by a relentless urge to describe feelings through materiality, using a variety of techniques ranging from traditional fibres to digital formats such as video. Conceptually, her work is based on the tension or the stagnation that is generated through managing emotional balance. The journey is never smooth, therefore, she aims to capture the varying stages that emerge. Tension is created by stitching, pulling, and layering of the bodily-like materials. These elements come together to form the physical embodiment of maintaining emotional balance. Ultimately, Liz hopes to evoke an alluring outcome from the struggle. Liz has proudly earned herself a Master of Fine Arts at the Tyler School of Art in Philadelphia in Fibres and Materials Studies. Her journey began at Kutztown University, where she proudly received her bachelor's degree in art education and a Bachelor in Fine Arts in Craft, concentrating in fibres. Her work has been featured in venues such as the WestBeth Gallery in New York, the Ceres Gallery, New York, and Fibre Art Now publications, and the Art Association of Harrisburg. We feel very honoured to be able to talk live with Liz Hamilton Quay today and gain further insights into her work, process, and passion for teaching. So let's get started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
All the time zones. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. I hope you enjoyed your slideshow. And I did take liberty with your artist statement and bio and sort of mingled all your beautiful words together. It's just written so beautifully on your website. So thank you.
You did a wonderful job. It was nice to hear it coming out of someone else's mouth other than my own this time.
Yeah. I always wonder, I always think to myself, gosh, it must be so hard to write artist statements. It must be one of the hardest things.
Well, I have that expression because I go through with my studio students every semester, and they write and rewrite their artist statements, and we go through the layers in detail of just this one paragraph statement, how much it has to say in such a little amount of space.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating to know that there's actually, like, it is part of the curriculum.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah, like a big. Yeah. Oh, so there's a lot of pressure to have yours pretty good then.
Yeah, I mean, I've been tweaking it for a while now, for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being live with us today, all the way from, close to New York, aren't you?
Yes, I'm about 2.5 hours from New York driving, and about 45 minutes from Philly. And then only another hour and a half from DC. So it's a really great location. Mm-hmm.
So cool. Yeah, it sounds so cool. We're in a little, not regional town. No, we're just in a little outskirts town from Melbourne. And I've never been to New York, and it just sounds so glamorous.
It certainly is, and I cannot wait to go back. For it's been, it's been about a year now, so I'm
Oh,
looking forward
wow.
to it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I wanted to also thank everyone for joining us live.
Thank
This
you.
is, we run these interviews live because we want to give people the opportunity to ask questions themselves, make comments, and interact with the artist yourself as much as possible. So make a comment, say hi to Liz, show your support, and it's always nice, very comforting to us on this side to know that people are enjoying it, and it really helps. So I thank you in advance for all your great questions and comments. So, Liz, I just fell in love with your work when I saw it recently. It was just so beautiful, and I really just had to find out more about you, and we'll talk about that piece as well. But for people, I've done a little bit of research, but I'd love to hear more about you and how you actually got into art textiles or fibre arts. Yeah, how did your journey begin?
So I've always known that I've wanted to be an artist. That was definitely, I feel like, as soon as I was born, I had a paintbrush or creating something always in my hands and in my head. Both my parents are actually artists and craftspeople. My mom is a painter. They're both photographers. My dad's now an encaustics artist. So, my family foundation is very arts influenced and very supportive. So thank you, Mom and Dad. But I really had a passion for sharing art with other people. And I decided when I got to college that I wanted to be an art educator. So I started off in the art education program at Kutztown University. And I kind of dabbled in just about everything while I was there. I didn't have anything that I was, wow, I'm really passionate about. I loved everything. And I thought that was okay as an art educator to kind of have my hands in just about, drawing and painting and sculpture, and not have one singular thing that I favored. And I thought that would make for a well-rounded classroom. One semester, I happened upon what was called at the time the non-loom fibers class, non-loom fibers and structures class. I said, what is that? That sounds very mysterious. So I walk into this classroom the very first day, and there are about 20 looms, floor looms, like the large 4-harness and 8-harness looms in the studio. I look up above, like where the projector was set up, and there are these beautiful handmade paper wings that span about 6 to 8 feet. And I said, wow, this is mysterious and amazing. And I quickly found out through my mentor, Barbara Schulman, I owe so much to her, so thank you, Barbara, that textiles and fiber was my calling, like sculptural fiber, just the act of stitching something together really brought home that aspect of fine art with the craftsmanship all into one package. So that's where I really quickly picked up a dual major at that point. And we still had a craft specific program at the time. And so I earned my BFA, and I continued on with art education because education is still obviously a passion of mine. And then I was able to really follow through with those dreams of creating a strong portfolio that was textile based at the time. So that's really where I started my foundation in textiles. And it really led me back to, my mom, when I was younger, was working on making porcelain dolls, and like Victorian porcelain dolls, like really authentic ones. She was like doing all of the porcelain casting, but she was also making all of the clothing too by hand. Yes, exactly. So I just remember that passion for the needle and thread so vividly growing up. And I thought, wow, this is such an amazing way to kind of honor like the strong women in my life to kind of follow through with this, kind of plan.
Yeah.
That's where it started. Yeah.
Yeah. What a beautiful upbringing. So I just want to make sure I got this right. So your dad is an encaustic artist.
Yes, currently. He was a pretty strong photographer, pretty much up until about, I mean, he's still a strong photographer, but like solidly photography up until about, I would say about 10, 15 years ago, he started getting into mixed material, and then he found encaustic art.
Yeah.
So he was able to like really blend his photography with, the act of like mixing color and, using, the waxes to layer. And it's awesome to see him really get into that process.
Oh yeah, I've been lucky enough to dabble in a bit of encaustic, and I feel like one day I'll be an encaustic artist, but for now I just love. I think what I love about it is I love getting my hands in it, and like you can rub pigments into it, and it's like fibre. It's very physical. And I also enjoy the smell of the beeswax, and we keep bees, and
really?
yeah, only just recently we just started keeping bees, and encaustic, that's so cool as well. Like, but that family, that's just that art, and that's ingrained in you. Like, how did you get fed? Did your mum and dad look after you as kids, or were they really truly creative? Like.
So I was very fortunate. My mom, she's a teacher as well. So she taught out of our home. She taught weekly painting classes, and she would teach around the country throughout the year. So I was really fortunate. I had her as a support system there all the time. And well, my dad started off as like an instructor at the art institutes of Pittsburgh and then Philadelphia. He moved into more of a corporate, situation when I was younger. But he would come home on the weekends, and that's what they did. They sat side by side in their own studio outlets, and my dad would work on his like powder horn, scrimshaw work, and my mom would be in her painting studio, and then my sister and I had the luxury of having our own little like kids studio, right, all in that same little area. So we did. We had a very loving, well-fed family.
That's so beautiful. Yeah, that's great. I mean, I struggle to make dinner for my family, so I can imagine, like, let alone making intricate dolls and. That is such what a blessed childhood, and is that something that you see? I don't know. You don't want to put expectations on your own children or anything like that, but you have a beautiful daughter who's really young, and congratulations, by the way. You're almost ready to have your second baby.
I am a little less than 5 weeks now, so I'm ready.
It's amazing.
Thanks. So we're really fortunate, but my husband's also an artist. He's a sculptor and an illustrator. I always tell my students, best advice, if you're a creative and you want to stay a creative, try to marry someone that is creative in their own way and is very understanding, to give you the time and breadth and space to be able to be creative. But I mean, I could see Ellie definitely being an artist. But, if she wants to be a scientist, I think that also needs so much creativity in and of itself, right?
Yeah. And I think, like what you did say, and we mentioned in your intro, was that art is creative problem solving. And I think if you can think about problems creatively, you can do anything in life.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I feel like half the time, yes, I'm definitely teaching textiles and fiber art and weaving in my classroom, but I'm also teaching students how to think for themselves and to think through problems creatively. That I think is just at the heart of making art, for sure.
Yeah, that is beautiful. Well, you're not alone tonight, that's for sure. Hi, Janine. We'll just say a quick hello. I'm Janet from the Midwest. Hi, Janet. It's really nice actually to be in a US time slot this morning, because usually we go live at 7 p.m., which is like 4 a.m. for you guys. So Francie's from the beautiful Adelaide Hills, and happy wedding anniversary, Francie, for yesterday. That's beautiful, 54 years. Auckland, hi Catherine and Anne. It is a treat to have a little Friday morning chat. Hi Julie. Yeah,
nice
community
cup of coffee, sure.
I know. Yeah. I've had one. I'm going to have another one a bit later. So, I just wanted to show a picture. You mentioned when you were talking the studio that you walked into.
Yes.
Now, is this reminiscent of? Is this the studio?
Essentially, it's the same space, but it had gone through a renovation after I had gone to school. So it's not quite the space. Actually, this photo is a little current pandemic format. You can see some of the looms are, closed up and stacked together to keep social distancing. But yeah, essentially it's the same space, which I can't tell you how fortunate I am to go back and have this lovely space. Kutztown has really been my home. For 15, 16 years now. I adore Kutztown University. So, and I feel really fortunate to be able to teach there and have all these lovely students.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I just get the feeling that you would be just one of the most passionate, encouraging, inspirational teachers to have. So your students are very lucky to have you too. So,
oh, thank you.
Yeah. I'd love to talk. We will talk more about your teaching, absolutely, and you might have some. I'm sure you'll have some wonderful insights for some people watching. And of course, if you've got questions, guys, ask Liz. She's happy to talk about process, technique, anything really. Pick her brain. But I'd love to talk about a little bit first about your work as an artist in your own right, and what it is about. Well, I guess my question is, we mentioned it in your own words. What are you trying to communicate, and what is it about sculpture that really intrigues you?
Absolutely. So I will say, Kutztown University gave me a wonderful foundation for technique, and I was just beginning to dabble in concept when I was there. And I would say the craft program was a very traditional, again, technique-based program. And I decided to go to graduate school directly after earning my BFA, which, has its pros and cons. I was pretty young at the time, but I decided to go to a school. I went to Tyler School of Art through Temple University in Philadelphia. And they are very concept heavy, very concept driven. And that's when I really struggled to really kind of find my voice at that time. But when I walked in there, I knew I wanted to talk about balance, emotional balance. And I just didn't really have a great understanding through myself. I was getting pretty lost in trying to decide what to do to kind of really show that to everyone. So I decided to kind of put materiality aside for a moment and really think about how to enact my concept strictly through, at the time I was trying to use technology, so through light and sound and movement. So I picked up video art while I was in graduate school. And I feel like that helped me to hone in on seeing how I can play with balance, whether it was, being completely off balance or being immersed in, a fully saturated emotion. That I think divorcing myself from material for about a year and a half really helped me to see that clearly, because I love materials so much, and I think I say it in my artist statement. I just have a joy for like materiality. So I really had to like force myself to not work with it for the moment. So I started working on some, like I said, some video art that kind of encapsulated that. But towards the end of my thesis, like when I was getting towards my thesis, I realized that I needed the material to go along with the video to really have a full, well-rounded experience for the viewer. And that's kind of where I picked my material back up and said, it's okay to work with this as long as you know why you're working with a material. That's kind of how I felt. I felt like I was putting a lot of limitations on myself at that point in time. But am I answering your question?
Yes, no, I'm just sitting here like this behind the scenes listening in awe. Trying to think of an intelligent question to ask you, but like I loved what you were saying about, you had to push yourself outside of your comfort zone to know that it was okay to come back.
Absolutely. I absolutely had to push and I lived in discomfort for about an entire year and a half, or, a full 2 years, really, honestly, while I was getting my MFA. Then again, when I was getting towards the end of my thesis, I think I made 6 pieces in the matter of, I think, 3 weeks, because I found my material again, and I said, all right, I know how to approach this with a more deft hand at this point. And I knew I needed to kind of minimize what I was doing and saying, what do I enjoy the most? I enjoy stitching and pulling things together. I actually ended up getting rid of like the thread, almost. And I think I have 2 images of some of the material things that I was working on for my thesis show. It's the leather that's all coiled up like this with the pins.
Ah, yes, that was fascinating. Here we go.
Yeah, so I ended up, like I said, getting rid of the thread completely and just working with dressmaking pins to be able to get this really strong kind of defensive texture, right, against the like soft undulation of the leather. And that's where I really found like the soft and hard were coming together for me. And to try to figure out, to sit uncomfortably in that almost in the imbalance, right, of that emotion. Yeah. And so those things were paired with video projections then in the background. I haven't really done a lot of video projection lately or video work just because it's a little harder to show without a gallery at your ready, right? Grad school have, like, opportunity to show video work pretty readily. But yeah.
We have a little snippet of your video that you did for your thesis. I managed to get that, but we'll also pop a link in the comment section to your YouTube channel, which shows the full video.
Perfect.
And what I loved about it was that it was beautiful to watch, and but then when you hear the meaning behind it, like everything in life, I think you go, oh yeah, I get it. Like to see it. So I'll just play a little bit of the video. I'm not sure if you'll be able to talk through it or not. I won't play the whole video. It goes for 8.
Yeah, it's like an 8-minute video. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'll just show people so that they can, visually see. And it's beautiful to keep, like, it's actually quite mesmerizing to watch, and it continues on, and you can explain what that was about. Yeah.
So the hands moves, in sync with one another to keep building this line of pills, and it continues until it completely covers the screen. So again, I'm investigating this emotional balance, right? And I was thinking about happiness, and I was thinking about taking, a little pill to create happiness and how we parcel it out for ourselves. We can parcel it out for ourselves each day, right? But then I was thinking about the monotony of doing that. And finally, when all of the pills reach the entire screen length, a mortar and pestle comes in and kind of makes them all into powder, and it's kind of this like fleeting happiness that you can never actually grasp. So I was really interested in investigating, our chemical dependency on happiness and in creating balance that way. So I had actually, in that same space, I had a sculpture, the plaster sculpture. Yes, this sculpture right here. That's about 36 inches, which is a yard. Not great with the metric system. But that's filled completely with B12 vitamins. And if you know what the smell of B12 vitamins smells like, it's very potent and really unforgettable kind of scent. It leaves a mark. So the whole gallery space was filled with this ground B12, the smell of it, while you had the sound of the pills, and that was the sound of the pills being spilled across the table. You would have that light and sound. Everyone's telling me it's 90 centimeters. Thank you, everyone. So you I appreciate it. So you would have the room was slightly dim except for the spotlights on the sculptural pieces, and then you would have the projector. That video was shown at about 20 feet across a wall. Yeah, and then the sound filled the gallery, and then again you'd have the smell, and then there was like a little bit of glitter on the B12 vitamin to make it shimmer. Kind of like that allure of trying to capture happiness, right? Yeah. And it's this idea of collecting it all, right? But never actually being able to, really attain it. So that's really where that emotional balance finally led me in my thesis work. So I felt like I actually accomplished something after those 2 years. And while those aren't fiber pieces, I did have other fiber material works that went along with it. Yeah.
I think that the conceptualization of it is incredible. And that bowl, I mean, in its own right, is stunning. Like 90 centimeters. That's big.
It was, yeah. So I did like a slip cast with plaster in a larger copper basin, and just layered. And that in of itself was such like, I love the process of making. So obviously, I enjoyed, being able to layer that plaster on and, having this like recreation of this gigantic bowl in front of me that I was able to kind of fill.
Yeah. Is it your fruit bowl at home now?
Sadly, it lives in storage at the moment.
Oh no, it's too
beautiful. Vitamin.
You call it your happy bowl.
Yes. I like that.
Catherine's made an interesting comment. I would see that leather with the pins as a type of eyelash yarn. Yeah, but then also see the pins as short threads. Anything that can be made into thread is a thread.
I totally agree, and I try to have my students think of fiber art or textile art, which we've been calling our department, as anything that's really flexible or something that's been made in a traditional textile technique. So I think that really opens the possibilities of what textiles or fiber arts can really be, particularly, particularly today in contemporary artwork.
Yeah, Catherine also says, can you see the comments down below? I don't know if you can see them. Oh, you can, great. So yeah, so talk about fibre, being a thread, Catherine, you're right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cross to any medium with ease. That's right.
I absolutely, I have to say this, but I love textile art, and you all already know this, I'm sure, but textile art is such an incredible vehicle for art making, because if you have interest in drawing, that can be easily achieved, even just through embroidery, or painting can be done with, dyes and color creation, and the way that color comes together in weaving is something that I don't think can be experienced in any other way, the way that the color mixes. Printmaking, sculpture, I think any fine art medium that's out there is really ends up being encompassed by a fiber technique in some way. I think it's absolutely incredible. And to think it's some of the most, it's like the oldest form of making, right? People are using nail binding for making like socks, right? Which is like a simple crochet, knotless net method. I just find that absolutely incredible.
Yes.
So, yeah, I think, obviously I'm the biggest advocate for fiber art, so.
Yeah, absolutely. And a basket's just recently been found, a woven basket that dates back to Neolithic times. So fiber art fibers have been with us forever. I'm interested to know or learn more about, or have that conversation about, so the transition from fiber art to, say, art textiles, and what that looks like in the States at the moment. And you mentioned that your department's changing names.
We did. It took a change after Barbara Schulman retired. We had another professor come in the interim before I arrived, and he ended up changing the title to be Textiles and Materials Studies. So when I received my MFA, I was going to a fiber art and materials studies program, and I think the intermixing of the material studies has become really integral in our field as well. But I thought it was such an interesting transition when I got there. I thought, oh, textiles, that sounds so industrial, right? Fiber sounds, so much more art, right? Art-based. But I've seen and have noticed that more and more for open calls or, groups that are being formed, that they're more textile. The names become more textile rather than fiber art. I'm always going to be fiber arts. The name of that is always going to be near and dear to me. So I'm interested to see where that continues to grow. And Ange, you were saying that in Australia, similarly, that textiles is catching on rather.
We're hearing a lot about art textiles and rather than fiber art,
right?
And I think it'll be a continuing conversation, and potentially it's like, do you refer to it as cloth or fabric, or different words.
I try to just call it material, I think, just to kind of really keep it open, because like cloth evokes such a specific thing, right? It's something maybe that just come off the loom, or like a gray cloth that's just come off the loom, or something that's meant for a utilitarian purpose. And then fabric gets into the weeds of different types of fabric and its own materiality. So when I'm talking in the studio, I try to keep it really loose, so students don't get caught up in just using fabric in my class. So, yeah. So I don't know if I've ever thought about that really specifically.
Yeah. When you're teaching your students, how important, like in terms of the order of things, right? do you suggest or recommend people to try out lots of different techniques and processes and then try and conceptualize? Or is it to find meaning with what you want to communicate and then find the technique that will match? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
in our introductory classes, it's very important that students have a really strong base in really specific areas. So for weaving, for instance, they need to know how to make tapestry. They need to know how to make cloth. And they need to know how to manipulate the color of their own warp and weft in their first semester. So that to me is like a really beautiful foundation to kind of branch off at that point. In my introduction to textiles class and materials studies, you know, they start with a single element procedure, which I typically use coiling because it's really easy to manipulate into a 3D format. Then we look at hand dyeing, embroidery, image transfer to create surface design. And then finally, we look at, you know, the absolute magnificent world of felting, and they create wearables. So I think having that foundation, having that solid foundation is important moving on. And in the studio classes, you know, I teach about 9 different techniques a semester, and that rotates through, you know, 4 semesters. So over the course of 2 years, they have, you know, an abundance of techniques to lean on, but I don't require them to use any of those. What I want them to come to the table with is thinking about their concept and, you know, how they want to see that through. And I really encourage students to use interdisciplinary techniques in their work because that's where the art world is geared. You know, yes, people are very specialized in what they do, but there are so many other artists out there that, you know, have a variety of techniques under their belt that they can go to say, this is how I want to express my concept to the world. So I try to gear my studio classes in a way that, you know, feeds into that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. But how do you grade that?
Oh.
How do you, like, you can, I mean, like, so subjective, and yes, you can grade technique, but how do you grade concept?
Oh, well, okay. So concept is really interesting because, you know, students have been talking about what they want to do, you know, throughout the entire time that they've been making it. You know, grading is probably the worst part of my job, I think.
Yeah, I can imagine.
And,
Yeah.
and I think it's the thing that students are most nervous about, right? And I really wish that grades didn't exist in, you know, in my studio. But when it comes down to is the critique, right? The critique is so important. They have this community of students with them, other artists that are at the same experience level. So, you know, some are, you know, a little bit more advanced at that point than others, but, you know, they are looking at the work, responding to it and saying, well, is that actually coming through? Right? So we can ask questions back to the artist and help that thought process of like, are we reaching that audience in a way that you're never going to have when you just leave a piece in the gallery, right? Is that reaching that person in the same way? And it's okay if it's not, but you know, why isn't it, right? And it doesn't have to be, you know, students really struggle with the fact that, you know, oh, my concept isn't coming across exactly the way that I meant it to. It's like, okay, well, let's dissect why it's not, right? And then remember that it is art and it's still open for interpretation. So yeah, I think concept ends up being really difficult to judge. But since I'm there with them through the entire process, I'm able to like, you know, hold their hand through that entire experience.
Yeah, That's fascinating. I was reading a book last night. It's a painting book, Lucian Freud, and he spoke about fake feeling. So he talks about, oh, I hate that work. Like, he was very, very good at criticism. And I think we can all be very good at criticism, but it's hard. Sometimes it's harder, you know. But he said that it gives me a fake feeling. Like, and if he felt like some artists fall into the popular culture. So they're creating work purely because they feel that it's going to be popular. But is it going to be timeless? And do you see that in your students? Like, they want to, I don't know what it's like, but I mean, I don't know, in the digital world we live in, I mean, are we creating work for likes? Are we creating work for exposure? Or are we creating deep, meaningful work that may not necessarily be liked or popular?
Absolutely. So I have Instagram is, I think, is a killer, or Pinterest. I think those are killers. Honestly, they've been so fantastic for young emerging artists to be able to get their work out there and to be able to be seen. And I think that's wonderful. But I think so many students get trapped in the fact that they want to brand themselves in a certain way, right? And then it, you know, and wanting those likes. And I have to explain to them and say, you know, having a failure in your work can be one of the most positive things that you experience. Having that criticism back and not just the likes is going to propel you forward and help you grow through your work. I always give a very lengthy talk about critique before we get started in the classroom in the beginning of the semester, saying, you know, we're here as the audience to really describe what the work is that we're seeing in front of us, because everyone sees everything differently, right? So we as audience members need to sit here and describe things. Then, you know, we get feedback from the artist. Then we're trying to analyze whether or not it's actually coming through in that way. And students get really hung up when they get negative comments. And so my job is to really turn that language around and say, how can this really be critical but useful to you, you know, moving forward. So I feel like that's a lot of my job in critique, is kind of helping students translate and to know you don't have to make things that are, you know, not everyone has to be Sally Hewitt, you know. Well, she's amazing, but you know, be yourself, be authentic. Sure.
And I think that's what might be missed, or it is missing, I guess, online, is that, you know, people can like and comment, and then I don't think people necessarily critique much, but maybe people are looking for that instant gratification, like, oh, okay. But is it helping? But Janet says absolutely that is a fantastic description of the critique process, and something I'll certainly be taking on board as well. We run a lot of online classes, and we have our tutors have a private Facebook group with their students. So and it is one of the things I think they struggle with, is that, well, do they want, like, one of our tutors just recently said, let me know if you want my feedback on your post. Like, actually say to me, I need your help with this. Can you help me? And then feels that she's got their permission to actually go deeper and go, okay.
It's because people intrinsically link their art making to their own self-worth, right? And I try to help students break that. I had a terrible time with that in graduate school, figuring out how to extrapolate my own self and my own self-worth from my artwork. And I see my students struggle with that so much. And they think when it's criticism, that it's all criticism on them, and it's not just about the artwork. So I absolutely understand in a workshop setting why you would seek permission before doing that. I think that it's really hard. And, you know, most artists are very, you know, very emotional, you know, with themselves, right?
Yeah. Creating art is putting yourself out there for the world to critique, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yes.
Like, here I am. Here's my insides. Now go for it. Ah! A bit like going live on Facebook, isn't it? It's a bit like, you're out there for the world to see.
I'm taking it back now.
That's right. But, we've got some beautiful comments and questions. So if you don't mind, I'll pop a couple up. I guess to grade, there has to be a story, Catherine. Yeah. So with the idea to start with, even if you have to be changed, then why?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
how do you?
Absolutely. My students struggle with this too, because we have a very, kind of set up process how we go through, there are 3 projects a semester, and because we're in academia, that's expected. So we have grades to present. So it has that rigidity to it. So we start out with like the proposal process where they show their ideas, and then they, do the research to go along with that, and they have drawings, right? And then they're expected to kind of follow through with that. And that's not always how it goes, right? You have to be a problem solver. So I tell them the best thing you could do is make a pivot. And so we talk about that in the critique process, if that, ended up having to happen, and why, the piece is more successful or less successful because of whatever happened. And it's a really strange process, because in my own studio, I don't, necessarily do that, but I have the luxury of time. So in my own studio, I'm more working with materials and seeing how they transform in front of me, and then working them into a piece, rather than, I've got this really solid idea for a piece and let's move forward and make it, right? I don't find that necessarily as fun. So it makes it difficult, right?
Yeah. Artists don't like rules. We don't want to stick to the rules.
Right.
Yeah. Janet, I see your question and I'll come back to it, but I'll just go to B quickly. Could I ask if you were the sole grader of your students? Yeah, thinking that if there's an independent examiner giving the final grade, so the concepts needs to reach someone who hasn't seen their development. That's very interesting.
So we do have assessment. University wouldn't exist without assessment. So we do have that kind of independent, but not all the time, right? Once in a while, we'll be able to have the luxury of having an artist come in and give critique in that way. But yes, I am the sole grader of my students. I do ask them for self-reflection, so that they can give me their comments back to see, how they thought that they reached it. But, it would be lovely to have, more examination from a separate set of eyes, pretty consistently. But yeah.
Yeah, good question. Janet's asked, are you typically using industrial felt in your work, for example, fortitude, or do you also make teach wet felting? Sorry, Nuno felting. Come on, Ange.
I do. I teach. Well, okay. First, let me say yes. I'm using industrial felt. I think there are 3 pieces: Fortitude, which is the yellow piece, Enveloped, and oh my goodness, I'm forgetting the name of the really tall black and white piece.
Yes,
encroaching. Yes, I'm using industrial felt for these pieces, but typically in my own classroom, I do that for these pieces in particular. They needed to get done in a really stringent timeline for a solo show that I was in. But in my own classroom, I teach wet felting, flat wet felting, 3D wet felting, and then needle felting, and I have Nuno felting as well. So I mean, this year in particular, I had to make demonstration videos for everything that I was teaching. So I have videos on how to do all of that. But yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. We were talking yesterday offline, Liz and I, about Catherine O'Leary's work, who's also like really great at felting and Nuno felting. Mm-hmm. And she's also started to incorporate video into her work, and I was like, oh, you guys need to talk.
Her work's incredible. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I love it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. People can go back and watch her live. Oh, we didn't actually do it live. It was pre-recorded a couple of weeks ago. But she's just, another just, incredible. And the flexibility that fibre and felt can give you like that is.
That's kind of how I start my video. I'm like, felt is this wonder product, right? That can be taken apart, put back together again. It's not like a woven fabric. It's not going to fray on you. And all my students are just in absolute awe of, the powers of the felt.
Yes. Yeah. And it's very like, my daughter's just dabbled a little bit in just the needle felting, and just to see her sitting there, it's just really nice.
It has a great sound to it, I think.
It does. Yeah. And you can feel the needle go through the fibres, and there's a little bit of resistance, but it's still easy. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like a metaphor for my life. Like, I like a bit of push and pull, but I still like things to be easy.
I hear you.
I'll just look for some more comments. Jan, so I often start with mind mapping with a word or sentence. This gives me a feeling or direction. Do you use this concept? Thanks, Jan.
I don't personally, but I have, when in my intro classes, when they're given a prompt, I actually start some of my prompts this way to help students kind of figure out how to think about concept for themselves. So I'm glad to see that you use it in real life and it works for you really well. Right now in my own work, I've been thinking about motherhood. My latest collection was What is Mother and Other Related Ephemera. And so I guess mother would be my word, right? And body. And it kind of just like branched off from there. So I guess in a way, yes, I did. But yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Certainly your piece, Ovum, caught my eye, and I'm just going to go to Bee's comment. So she says, art is a piece of your soul. You feel very response. Yeah. So you feel every response. Mm-hmm. Yeah. As long as the viewer stays and looks, responds, whatever that may be, I feel like I've been successful. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, that was one thing that struck me as well with your work, was that I had a response to it. So it was beautiful. It was sitting on a white plinth. It was this gorgeous sculpture from further, and it's my favorite color, that burnt orange. I just
love that color. Yes.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Like I paint my hair. Like, yeah, I like often wear that color. I just feel like I have
to use it in my art. My husband wouldn't like that in the house.
Oh, it doesn't matter. Oh, it's a balance, isn't it? But
yeah.
So your piece drew me in first and foremost purely from color. I was like, oh, what's that? So that was a very personal response. But then I walked up to it, and then I didn't really understand what it was, because my mind goes straight to, what am I looking at? First of all, I go, oh, I like that. What am I looking at? Mm-hmm. And then I went, I want to understand. Then I was like, oh, I wonder what this means. So that next question I asked myself is, what does this mean? And then somebody walked past me. She goes, oh, isn't that a beautiful ovum? And I'm like, I don't know what an ovum is. Like that. And then I was like, ovum, okay, all right. And then we started chatting to this lady, and she was describing to me what it was. And I'm like, oh my God. And then I started going deeper, thinking, I wonder if this artist has had trouble conceiving. That's where my mind went when I looked at that piece. And then I thought, oh, I feel like there's something really deep and meaningful behind this. And I go straight to the struggle behind a piece. So.
And that was such a beautiful. Thank you for sharing that moment that you had with my work. I never get to hear that. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. That was awesome. Yeah. So yes. Ovum is, the egg, right? And I had just had my daughter. She's 3.5 now. I had just had her, and I was missing myself, right? For any of you that are mothers, I'm sure you can relate. I was just missing myself, being in touch with myself, and I had time to be able to go to my studio, and I just sat down on my sewing machine, and I took this transparent piece of organza, and I just started stitching with this like random pattern. Yes, exactly. On my sewing machine, and I just started like methodically and meditatively, going over and over and layering. I think there are about 7 or 8 different color threads in that piece all together, to kind of create the warmth that you see. And all of a sudden, that really thin, transparent organza was beginning to gain structure. And I'm really drawn to, I'll talk about this piece then too. Yeah. I'm really drawn to like biological illustrations. And I was thinking about the mitosis process, which is, the cell division of the egg and how it grows. And I was thinking about, this piece of material in front of me was taking shape. And, I was thinking about, that egg growing within me, and how it was just such a labor of love, right? And I saw this piece in a similar light. And so this is actually the first piece of that new collection that I had made, my last collection of work. And it's my favorite out of all of them still. What you can't see in that photo, it is 3-dimensional, and it's holding like these little pellets, plastic pellets on the inside that were kind of, to me, were reminiscent of, all of the eggs that are held in the fallopian, I cannot think of
ovaries
the ovaries. Oh my goodness! In the ovaries,
you're pregnant.
Yes, I have baby brain. Let's blame it on that. So in the ovaries, so I have a really strong interest in not replicating things. I have a stronger interest in kind of dissecting them in a way and kind of manipulating and putting them back together in an abstracted form. So that's where all of those ideas kind of mesh together for this piece. So, and the stillness of labor was the other piece that you showed. That is about 90 centimeters, 90 centimeters as well. And that actually hangs from the ceiling, about probably about 70 centimeters off the floor. So it's about hip height. I'll say it's 28 inches just for a translation, for my American friends here. So it's about hip height. And when I've only installed this piece once, but I was at the show opening, and this woman had been standing there staring at it for a long time. And yes, you only need 10 centimeters for birth, and I will, only, I don't want to emphasize that. But she was standing at this piece, and she said, "I feel the pain of this woman," right? And I had a very long labor with my daughter, and I said, and she was emotional, thinking about her own labor, and I just felt so connected to this woman, just through this like very abstract, thing hanging from the ceiling. It was really beautiful moment, to be able to share with her. But that's done in a similar format, technique.
Yeah, well, it was just beautiful, and it's traveling around Australia now, and I know that it's been displayed in New York here. Just beautiful. What are your hopes for that piece? Is it for sale? Like, do you want to bring it home and have it with you?
I'm not entirely sure. I struggle with letting go of my artwork, which is terrible and not the way that it should be. But I mean, I'm very fortunate in the fact that I know I'm not relying solely on my art making to sustain me. I'm sustained through exhibition frequent exhibition. But I have my primary job. But yes, it is, I guess, for sale or
for sale, but don't buy it. It's fine. It's for sale reluctantly. Yeah. How hard is it to get an exhibition under your belt? Like, what do you advise your students? Do you recommend that they put themselves out there? And what's the process to have an exhibition? I'd
Absolutely.
love to. Yeah.
So I always tell my students the earlier the better. I have an exercise every semester. Unfortunately, we did forego it this semester, so I want to be totally truthful, just because COVID, everyone was a little burnt out by the end. But for my students, I set up a kind of fake exhibition form where they would need to have an artist statement, a bio, excellent photographs, be able to title their work, and go through the process of applying to an exhibition, where I can critique it and help look over anything that I would see as an inconsistency that would prevent them from being accepted into a gallery. So I always have them do that. And then when they get hired, they take 5 semesters to be able to graduate with a textile degree at Kutztown University. So by the end, they should be applying to shows outside of the university. And I would say that they have a lot of success actually getting into, real exhibitions. But for myself, I tell my students all the time, if you don't apply, it'll never happen, right? So the more you apply, the more you'll be rejected, the easier it becomes to be rejected. And unfortunately, right? But typically I'm in about 5 to 7 shows a year. I would say.
That's incredible. And you teach, and you have a child, and you're married, and you're pregnant. My God.
Balance.
Is there such a thing? And maybe that's the quest, emotional balance, time balance. Balance is such a huge overarching concept on everything that we do. And maybe there is no balance. Like, maybe we just have to come to, and sometimes life is chaos and sometimes it's not. But really, to have a balance, are we trying to reach for the unachievable? Like, it's just not possible.
I would say the biggest thing is I don't do it by myself.
Yes.
Ever. I have my wonderful husband, who is just such a wonderful co-parent to our children, to our one child at the moment, to our children in the future here. And then, I have a very supportive family that lives, in closer proximity. And, I take my work very seriously. I take my work very seriously, as far as teaching and then being able to make in the studio. And I love it. I think it comes from a personal place of I'm very happy with what I do. If I were unhappy with what I was doing, I think it would be a lot harder to kind of maintain that. And again, I'm extremely fortunate in the fact that I love what I do. I know that that's not a luxury that everyone has. So I think that's really where it comes from. And I try not to sweat the small stuff, like, the dishes. And just make sure my kid knows that I love her and spend the time that I need with her, right? But I like balance is hard.
Yeah, but it sounds like you've got your priorities in the right order.
I try to.
One thing that you said that was really profound for me was that you take your art seriously. Like, a lot of people, I think, don't prioritize a lot of amateurs don't even prioritize their art making because they feel like, it's not important, or there's so many other things to do. But to be able to actually go, well, no, this is my time and it's serving actually a greater good for me, then I think it's really, really important.
And I would encourage anyone to, if it's making you happy, make sure you're taking the time to be, even if it's a half an hour, 2 or 3 times a week. That's more progress than you had last week, right? And you were able to, just focus on yourself. I always talk to my students about self-care. I think that's a huge part of self-care, is being able to be creative in your own time.
Yeah. That's gorgeous. That's gorgeous. I've got a couple of last questions, and then I will let you go, because you've got a young daughter and she needs to get to bed. But you must have your sort of finger on the pulse of the contemporary art scene, and, living close to New York. And where do you see contemporary fibre art going? Where is it, like, what are your thoughts on it? Where are we headed?
I think it's a very exciting time to be a fiber artist. I, go into exhibitions and I see flexible material everywhere, and I'm like, oh, they are, in some way, in this realm of textiles at this moment, where there's an artist using a traditional textile technique in a completely new way. And it's so fascinating. I really think textile is accessible to so many artists, and that I think it's kind of having its own revolution again. It's really, and I have to thank the women of the 70s, for bringing fibers to the forefront and making it, the art that it is today. But I think there's a whole new generation of students that are, students and artists that are like realizing the power that textiles can hold within it.
Yeah. And with beautiful, amazing mentors and teachers like you, I'm excited. I'm excited by what we're going to see in the future. I really am.
Me too. That is my hope.
Yeah. And I'm just really grateful that we can help champion the arts, from our small little office in Warrandyte, and bring the world closer to you, and share everybody's amazing work as well. It's just, we're pretty lucky, aren't we? We're so lucky.
We are. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Oh, no, you're most welcome, Liz. As soon as I saw your piece, I knew that there was more to that than meets the eye. And there is so much more. And I'm sure I've missed many questions that I've got for you. And
I know we could probably talk another 2 hours. That's okay.
Yeah, that's right. And your painting behind you is absolutely beautiful, by the way. I love it. And we were saying earlier that I did try and match my scarf to the painting. I think I did a pretty good job.
I think you did too. It's lovely.
Yeah. This one's from India. This one's a beautiful woven.
Oh, gorgeous. Is it?
Yeah, it's very special. I love it.
Hand painted. It looks gorgeous.
Yeah. If I ever head back, we won't go there. But if we can ever get back, which we will.
We will.
I'll look for one and send it to you.
Wonderful.
I love sending gifts to our artists. I've sent some crazy things across the world to Friday feature artists, like old hat boxes and fabric. And
that was a gift when I was interning at a museum. They gave me a hat box because I did an induction of about 60 different vintage hats, and they gave me a hat box.
Yeah. Like an old vintage one.
Oh yeah, it was beautiful.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, top hat boxes are incredible. I actually have I use it as a pot plant holder.
Ooh, I like that idea.
Yeah, you got to be careful it doesn't get moldy at the bottom, though. You have to be a bit careful. So yeah. Amazing. Okay, we're going to pop a link up to your Instagram feed, and please, people follow along. You've got a beautiful website if people would like to find out more about you and your work. And just can't wait to follow along. And I started following the Textiles art. Is it the Textiles study group in New York as well?
Yes.
That's
not a bad amazing group. Yes. So if anybody's interested, we do I'm a little bit farther away to be able to make the meetings, but they do hold monthly meetings that now they're doing them on Zoom, but it's the Textile Study Group of New York. They bring in amazing speakers monthly. They have wonderful programming, excellent exhibition opportunities. And again, international is absolutely welcomed.
Oh, great. That's really good to hear, because you often hear if they've got like a New York, it's like, oh, okay. But yeah, I'd love to. I started following them, and yeah, that looks amazing. So much inspiration out there. So yeah. Wonderful. Liz, last question. We always ask it, and I apologize in advance. I didn't give you the heads up. But if there was something that you'd like to be remembered for as an artist or a teacher, as a human being, what would that be? Or is there a special quote that you live by? Any parting words, really?
I would like to, leave the next generation with more knowledge about textile arts for the future, because I don't think it's something that should ever get lost. And I tell my students that at the end of weaving in particular, that thank you for experiencing this class. And if you don't, continue to partake, please, tell your generations of students, and please share this as you move forward. So I think that would be my greatest contribution or wish for the future. Yeah,
that's gorgeous. Well, you're certainly doing that. You're certainly inspiring a lot, and you've inspired a lot of people tonight. And people that watch this on replay will love it. So thank you. Thank you so much, Liz. And I'm going to play. Oh, you're welcome. Anytime at all. If there's anything we can ever do for you in Australia, just let us know. Honestly. Yeah. Awesome. Send you an old hat box or something. We're going to play a little exit video, and this is the opportunity for everyone watching to please say thank you to Liz, and we'll put your comments up on the screen as we're exiting. So thank you once again, Liz, and good luck with baby number 2.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Your little girl is going to grow so much as soon as it's born. Perspective is an amazing thing. You hold this tiny newborn baby, and then all of a sudden your toddler feels like a giant.
I'm sure. Oh my goodness, yes. I don't know.
Yeah. No one's ever ready.
No. True.
If we waited until we were ready, nothing will ever get done.
Very true.
Yeah. Gorgeous.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.